What's up, guys? Ryan Schultz here from E39 Source. Today we've got a 2002 E39 M5 and we're going to be doing a headliner and sunroof cassette removal and reinstallation DIY. This is a super fun procedure that involves spending several hours in the car removing a whole lot of different pieces to get the headliner out and then a bunch more pieces to get the sunroof cassette out. All I've done so far is remove the sunroof glass. What you'll do is put the glass in tilt mode by pressing in the sunroof button. That will raise the rear up. If yours is broken like this and the rear does not raise up, you can force it up once you've already asked the motor to move in that way. That will expose two plastic or rubber gaiters, look like little accordions that fit right inside the sunroof. Those gaiters look like this, and if we take a look at the side profile, that will reveal how it's held on. There's no hardware or anything here. It just clamps on at the top and at the bottom. What you don't want to do is grab it here in the middle and just pull. You will tear this, and this is not replaceable by itself. You have to buy an entire repair kit, which is about $400 a side, so don't burn $800. What you want to do is start down at the bottom, which is this part, and get your finger right in here where my thumb is, and very gently start to pull it out. Do not pull in a fashion that will tear where the gaiter part attaches to what's sandwiched in there. Just get that started. Once you get the bottom part off, you'll be able to get up top and pull much more evenly in a way that's perpendicular to the way the rest of this is installed. So you get both of these off, and then you'll be greeted with 3 Torx 25 fasteners. 2 go here in the rear into those screw bores. Just get a little quarter drive T25 and pull those out. And then up here in the front, you'll see another T25 holding it into this lever. This little bump also goes in the sunroof glass itself for alignment. So when you get all those screws out, you'll need some sort of a little hook or a little pry tool. You'll see this arm has play in it for this reason. You'll be able to force these arms out and free the glass. At which point you'll be able to push the glass up in the center, have someone come and lift the glass off and away from the car very carefully. If you're having trouble accessing the front bolt, you can actually take this slider and from inside the car, just take this and push it backwards a little bit. That'll get you more access to that front bolt. Well, we're working with the glass already. Let's go ahead and do a little bit more work up here where we can stand and be a little more comfortable. So to get the shade out, we'll need to remove these black plastic tracks or guides. So we'll see another T25 screw right here, and these thread into plastic. So be careful with these. Don't use any impact tools. During reinstallation, they do not need to be tight. Gently snug it down. With the T25 screw removed, we can take this track and push it straight back towards the rear of the car, all the way back. And we'll see that it's held in its guide here by those 2 little plastic tabs. We're going to keep going until it gets behind those tabs, at which point it is free, it can be pulled out and removed. With that done on both sides, we can take our Alcantara or headliner colored slider, move it all the way forwards. We're going to find a few more T25 fasteners holding the actual slider onto the sunroof. So we've got one here located at this metal spring clip and another one in the rear. Total of 4 screws will have the slider out of the car. An important note here to proceed. Once the glass has been removed, even without the glass installed, you'll want to close the sunroof again by pushing the button forwards. That will allow you to slide the slider all the way forwards for better access. Removing the slider reveals a whole bunch of very small Torx 10 fasteners that go around the perimeter of the sunroof. This actually holds the headliner up tight to the ceiling. The ones in the rear are more challenging to access. What we can do with this little weather deflector, or whatever this piece is carefully yet firmly at the outside right here. I'm just going to take it and pull up, and it's going to pop off of the sunroof there. You see there's a little pin and a little track, a little guide right there in the plastic. And that has now given us the ability to push that back and get clean access to these additional T10s. After removing all the T10s, we can go ahead and pull this piece up and out of the car. That's going to conclude the work that we're going to do with the roof right now. At this point, we're going to move to the interior and start disassembly of the A, B, and C pillars, and ultimately the headliner. So a little overview of what we need to remove. Obviously, both A pillars. We're going to need to remove both of the visors, visor clips, lights, all 4 grab handles, center dome light, home link panel, microphone if equipped, sunroof switch, home link panel, as I call this piece here. Along the B pillar, we'll need to remove the upper B pillar. To get that off, we've got to remove the lower B pillar. To get that off, we've got to remove both the rear and front little kick plate panels here. From the back seat, we'll need to remove both C pillar lights, as well as the pillars themselves. Starting at the A pillars in the top corner, we'll notice that there's a small plastic cover. It says HPS, that's for head protection system. There are airbags run behind the A-pillars and throughout the headliner in this car, so we do need to be careful. I recommend you disconnect the negative pole on the battery during this procedure. But we can get behind here with some sort of small pick or pry tool and gently wedge this cover off, which will expose a T25 torque screw. It's a self-tapping screw with a pretty long shank. We'll remove that, put that somewhere safe for now. With the screw out, we can go ahead and remove the A-pillars. This is a very delicate and fragile operation. About 99.9% of E39s already have broken center plastic tabs here, and I can see that this one is. We can see that the A-pillar bows out ever so slightly in the front. Those plastic tabs all probably broke years ago from time, thermal cycles, mostly time, so we'll need to be careful with that. The idea is we need to pull the A-pillar out away from the glass and kind of hinge it out of the car this way. And as it starts to come out, there's a tab that goes down into the dash, so we'll need to pull it up and towards us at about the same angle it sits here in the car. Get an idea for how deep that recessed area is where the screw goes. I started up there and pulled that away. There's also a tab on the outer side that kind of bring it back down this way a little bit. But with it out this far, I should be able to gently take the trim and just wiggle it out and forwards. And that's the tab we've got to be careful with there, and the one that's already broken is right here. Important note, if you replace this piece right now, which is still available, yet very expensive, and you're putting a new one in here, you want to be sure to look inside that fastener, and sure enough, there's what's left of the old broken tab. Use a pick or a small tool to pry that out of there, otherwise you'll break the tab on your new one by forcing it in where there's not room for it. Driver's side piece works the same way, and miraculously, that tab is not yet broken. Moving on to the home link panel and center dome light, there's a bit of a trick here to make this as easy as possible. So we can take the speaker grill, kind of peel that down and see that we do have a microphone installed here, so we could just pull that electrical connector out. With the speaker grill pulled out, you can reach in and push down the dome light like that, so we don't have to pry or risk breaking anything. Dome light's held in with one electrical connection. On the left side of the connector, you'll see a small tab. Press the tab towards the wires and pull the connector out. I disconnected the microphone and put the cover back in there, but at this point we can reach up, feel the back of the home link panel, push this straight down, and it will then pop out like this. We've got 4 tabs in the rearmost section of the panel, and then 2 more on either side. That reveals 2 more electrical connections, one for the home link switch, grab and pull, and 1 more for the sunroof switch itself, same deal. Up next is the visor. Step 1, open it up, unclip it from the clip, slide it all the way over out of the way. These clips are held in with 2 Torx 20 screws, but they're under these doors. These little doors have plastic tabs that slide in. So if you use a small flathead screwdriver, you can hinge the door over and reveal the fastener. And the other side works the same way. Notice that some E39s use a small push rivet up here. I don't know why some do and some don't. But you pry out the middle head first, and then carefully and gently around the headliner here, pry the rest of it out. This one's actually real tight, but there it comes. To remove the rest of the sun visor, we've got to pop off this little black beauty cover that hides 2 or 3 more Torx 25 screws. Trim removal tool like this, and don't worry, I've already cleaned this tool, but we'll just get it under the side or the tip of that trim. Gently pry down, minding the light. Now we'll be able to move the visor all the way over to the side window and take that cover down and reveal 2 more screws. At this point, the visor is only held on by the electrical connector, which is a simple 2-pin. Just grab that and pull. Up next are the vanity lights. These are super simple. Just get a few fingers in between the light and the headliner. Don't pull down out of here, it's just got some plastic tabs. Don't grab the light and pull. There's a very fragile black plastic connector up there that holds the wire snug against the ceiling. So hold the back of the wire and just pull the light away to disconnect the connection. Moving on to the grab handles, all of these work the exact same way. The front 2 are the same. The rears are different because they incorporate that hook. But we're going to take this and open it up all the way. Take a small pick tool, put it in there and pull down. You'll see that door hinges now, like this. And if we keep the handle all the way open and push the door into the handle, it actually snaps in place and holds the handle open for us. That's why I love German cars. Do the same thing on the left side. Take out those 2 Phillips head screws. We can do this on all of the grab handles. Up next, we'll be removing the C-pillar lights. This can be done very easily with a plastic non-marring pry tool. Insert it in between the light and the C-pillar at the top, not the bottom. Give a gentle pry, and it will fall out like this. We've got 1 3-pin connector. Simply pull that out. If your E39 was manufactured after September 1st, 2001, being a 2002 model year or later, you'll find two small 8mm screws holding in the C-pillar trim. And go ahead and remove those. With the screws removed, we have two more plastic tabs holding this in, or plastic push rivets. There's one up here and there's another one about the other side of my finger. What we want to do is get in there and pull out evenly. In fact, that one may already be broken or was not clipped in all the way. We can use a pry tool in here to gently wedge it in between the chassis and that clip. Pry very gently and very evenly. All of this plastic is extremely brittle and easy to break. With those removed, it's a matter of pulling the trim away from the vehicle and slightly forwards. There's three more plastic tabs along where it meets the rear glass that need to make it out of the chassis. Generally, pulling forwards is the way to do that. If you get one that's sticky, don't force it. Take your time and do it gently. It will pull away from the door gasket seal here. It's got a little bit of a tail that goes just behind the rear seat back cushion. There's no need to remove the seat. It'll kind of pull up and out of there as you fight this thing out. Here's a look at the back side of the pillar. These are the three plastic tabs I was talking about. The key to getting those out if they're stuck is simply pulling the trim forwards towards the front of the car. There's that tail, and it just snakes right out of the car, no problem. As I mentioned with the B-pillar trims, the tops can't come off until the bottoms come off. The bottoms can't come off until we remove these kick plates. Underneath this sill are three plastic tabs that press down into the chassis. You can generally just get your fingers under it, starting at one of the corners, not the middle, as I'm demonstrating. But you get in there and give a nice firm pull straight up, and you'll get that off. The rear kick plate is a similar design, though it's important to note that there's a 10mm screw holding this onto the chassis. To access that screw, you would need to remove the bottom seat cushion. I don't think we need to do that right now. We're just going to be able to pull the front two tabs up gently, let it hinge on that screw. All we've got to do here is release this in the front so we can slide the lower B-pillar trim out from underneath this kick panel. So I've released the kick panels to this point, just enough that we can see the end of the B-pillar trim. I've removed the front ones entirely. We start at the bottom, reach in under the lower B-pillar trim, and there are three little plastic rivets that press into the chassis, so you'll be able to get in between them to get your fingers in there, slide over and give it a little pull. Usually these fall out. They look like that. So we'll move over towards the center, give that a little tug, and then all the way to the front. Obviously I've got the seat adjusted all the way forwards and all the way up for this. With those three released, we'll be able to pull the trim away from the chassis, pull straight down about an inch or two, and we'll see how it interfaces here with the upper B-pillar. There's these little tabs on the back, right here and right here. And during reinstallation, we'll need to make sure that it's pressed flush against the upper B-pillar. There's going to slide behind this tan up into place. So that's what keeps it tight at the top. Also at the top of the lower B-pillar, there's a third tab right there in the center that'll sandwich underneath the upper B-pillar trim. We're back to this tool for the upper B-pillar trim. You can essentially just wedge that under there as far as it goes. Give it a quick pop like that. Not too aggressive, just enough to break those free, at which point it pulls away from the chassis and will now wiggle down off of its little mounting bracket up there. You can see these tabs sandwiched right in here in this black plastic trim piece. If you want to take the B-pillar out entirely, you'll need to come down here and remove this Torx 50 for the seat belt. That'll allow the seat belt to pull up and through the seat. Then you'll be able to just fit the buckle and bottom of the belt through there, so you can take this out of the car. In this case, we're just dropping the headliner to service the sunroof. I think I'm just going to leave this attached and kind of let it hang out here on the belt. We've removed every trim item and fastener holding the headliner in the car. It is important to note that as we start to remove it, we will have one more electrical connection for our interior motion sensor here. You can try to pop this off now and disconnect it, but in my experience, it's too risky with the plastic in there. Things will just break. So you're better off to, once it's lowered and kind of resting on the seats and headrests in here, you can just reach in through the sunroof hole, simply disconnect it, but leave it attached to the headliner. To get the headliner out of the car, we really want to start in the front, just start pulling down gently. If it feels like it's still attached somewhere, it probably is. Do not force it, do not bend it. Right now, the only thing keeping it up on the roof are actually these door gaskets. The headliner sandwiches underneath this velvety trim around the door gasket. So as we start to pull down, and once it breaks free from here, it's going to be completely loose inside the car. At the rear windshield, the headliner kind of has a shape like this. It's like a C. And when we take it out and put it in, this will be the first and last attachment points here as it kind of gets pushed back towards the glass and then pulled forward over the chassis, and that's what holds it up in the rear. To make things a little bit easier to get the headliner out of the car, I went ahead and removed the passenger seat headrest. Raise it up enough that you can get your hand in there, your arm, use that as leverage. Good firm tug will pop it right out of the seat. Went ahead and removed the driver's headrest as well, though I don't think that's a requirement. For seat adjustment, we want to move both the bottom and front portions of the bottom cushion all the way down. Recline the backrest as far as it goes before you crush the rear seats, and then have the seat all the way forwards as well. And down she comes. With the headliner resting down on the seats, we now have access to that final electrical connection for the interior motion sensor, which will pull out towards the passenger side. We're about halfway out of the car right now. I know this looks sloppy, but this is the procedure. It only fits out of the rear doors. I always use the rear right. The only tiny bit of flexing or bending you have to do is right here initially on this corner, just a little bit like that to clear the rear door rearmost kink. And once you get past that first grab handle, it's a pretty easy fit that I'll still need both hands for. You'll be surprised at how light the headliner is when you get it out of the car. Just put it in a clean, safe location as we complete the rest of the service here, which is removing the sunroof cassette entirely. So our tape here has already failed. It's not even close to being sticky anymore. I'm going to go ahead and peel those two pieces off. This tape was to hold up the wires for the interior motion sensor. I've got fresh Tessa tape. We'll repair that when the new cassette is in. There's a series of Torx fasteners around the perimeter of the cassette here that we'll need to be removing. They appear to all be Torx 20s around the entire thing. Of course, we have the connection up here for the motor. That will need to be undone. And anywhere where these little wiring management clips clip into the cassette itself, we'll need to pull those off. Of course, the wiring harness stays in the car. At each corner of the sunroof cassette, we have these black rubber drain tubes that will need to be pulled off and away from the sunroof cassette. The connection at the sunroof motor is real simple. Right at the top in the center, there's a tab. Press the tab down, pull the connector out. Up next, we've got to remove the sunroof motor itself. It's held in with 3 Torx 25 screws. You can see the one right there. There's a second screw here, and third screw here. With the motor removed, that reveals one more Torx 25 holding the sunroof in right here. With that removed, the sunroof cassette is only held into the car with 3 items. In the front, we've got this tab that's part of the cassette that slots into the chassis here so it doesn't just fall down. Nice engineering. Moving along to the back, we'll see some more spring tabs right here. There's one on each side. Those will need to be pulled or pried over to the right with a flathead screwdriver, and that will allow the back to fall down. In the meantime, it's become quite floppy. And here it is. That sort of thing is impossible to film when you're the only one working. This rubber gasket seems to stick on the roof, so it pulled off the sunroof, but I was able to just pull it off the roof. It's just stuck on there after 20 years. This piece here was probably the biggest fight. It was really wedged in the chassis up there in that little groove. In fact, so much so that I kept looking for another fastener, but I could not find one. So I just got a screwdriver and gently pried and wedged, and it finally came out. At which point, you'll very carefully maneuver it around the interior. I covered the seats, dashboard, and console and various pieces of this packing material just for protection. But it fits out the passenger front door pretty easily. I did recline the seat back all the way back again like we did for the headliner, and it came right out. So really the only wiring management that we needed to disconnect, any of these gray little plastic clips that go up into the cassette, or I took these out as well that were here just so I would have a little bit more room to wedge that front tab out. But it's largely the electrical connection for the interior motion sensor that is clipped up and down the passenger side that for now I've just put in that little clip that held the back of the cassette in there. So now we'll see some genuine BMW cardboard, some German cardboard up there on the roof for sound insulation, and I suppose just a soft filler space. But the cassette's out, it's not heavy, and tomorrow we'll be installing a new one. Welcome back. We fast forward 2 days. We've got a new genuine BMW sunroof cassette just placed in the car in the lightest possible way. There's no screws, nothing new holding it in. Comes in that massive box over there. Open it up and it is pretty much everything that we had before. The only components we need to move over, of course, will be the glass panel at the end of the job and the motor itself. Looking up here where the motor will be installed, we interestingly get another Torx 25 screw. And then we've got this weird block here held in with another Torx 25 screw but that is to keep the actual helical cut gear drive in the system. So I suspect that that's on our old motor, and I may not need that piece. If it's easy enough to swap over, I'll do it so we have a new one and those gears can mesh without any wear. We'll get a look at that later. All of that can be done from inside the car. For installation, you maneuver the sunroof in the car back first, and you turn it back here. You want to sandwich this tab into the slot on the chassis here by the rearview mirror first, push it forwards, then raise it up in the back until those black clips can push right in here and lock it up in place. And there's still plenty of play. This thing's fairly loose in here. It can move around. And I think I'm just going to run in all the T20, Torx 20 bolts around the perimeter just lightly, make sure they all catch, and we'll be able to snug them up. BMW has not printed a torque spec for that, so snug. With the sunroof attached to the ceiling, we're going to go ahead and install our motor. Remember that the one torque screw is longer. The longer screw is here. This goes through the motor and up into the chassis. The other two screws here and here are the same length. Now the new cassette comes with the track rolled all the way back, so we need to move that forwards. The way to do that is going to be to insert the sunroof crank tool, which is in your trunk toolkit, shaped like this, and one half of it is a flathead screwdriver. The other side is a 4mm Allen key. You'll put that in there and carefully but firmly crank this all the way until you get the sunroof back in this position, which is where we're going to be installing the glass. That's vent mode. Now, if you're like me, I went ahead and installed the glass, ran it back forwards a few times, put it in vent mode, made sure that everything is working smoothly. And indeed it is. So we're ready to proceed with the headliner installation. Very, very important. Do not forget to hook up your 4 sunroof drains, 1 in each corner. You've got 5 or 6 Torx 25s running down the side. There's 6 screws in the front. Of course, 5 more on the right side. Then we have all those wiring clips that go up into the chassis and or the sunroof all the way around. We've got 2 on this side, on the passenger side, that clip this in, and then I went ahead and replaced that Tessa tape. Got that on there. This is going to be for our motion sensor inside. So now we're ready to put the headliner in here. I put the headliner back in the same way it came out the rear door, obviously head first with the seats reclined and the headrests removed. It's a little bit cumbersome by yourself, though it is possible. When you get it in, as we talked about before, you want to hinge the back of the headliner against the rear glass on first. As I said, it's kind of a C-shaped hook back there that goes over the chassis. Then you pull it forwards to get that nice and tight. And then you just go around with your fingers and let these door seal pieces hold it in place. And it does. That's the only thing holding this whole headliner in the car right now. So you'll just need to get a tool in there, or your fingers. Be careful and don't run your fingers on the inside of the headliner. You can cut yourself pretty badly on that. Ask me how I know. But with that in place, I went ahead and installed the glass for testing purposes. I do not want to button all this up and put all the hardware back in and find out that there's an issue. So the glass is in. There's torque screws are now visible. We didn't see that in the beginning of the video, but those are the 2 in the rear. The one in the front is up there in the shadows. I'm trying to angle my headlight right about there in the light. They're all Torx 25, and I'll have a torque spec for those at the end of the video. But just put it in, snug it down, try to align it to the best of your ability, and test this sucker. Run it back 10 times, run it up 10 times. And before you get too deep into testing, we want to do a little bit of calibration. And this will teach the motor where the new stops are. Here's how you do that. So you want the key in position number 1. No gauges yet, just turn it till it clicks once and you'll notice the odometer becomes active and your nav wakes up. Then you're going to press and hold the vent mode button here on the switch for about 20 or 30 seconds. And obviously it's going to vent itself up, and I've already calibrated this, so I'm not going to mess with it. But press and hold that. It'll run itself up and back a couple of times, and that'll just teach the motor this is your closed position. And as it knows that, then the rest of the functions will start to work. So we're going to go from vent mode. I'm going to just ask it to open up all the way. Hear that operation is smooth and quiet without any signs of binding or clicking or anything that sounds nasty. It opens up all the way, which is right about with the glass just protruding from the headliner here, about 3/4 of an inch. We'll ask it to close. And it does that without running into the little deflector. And before I calibrated it, it would close, but not quite all the way. And we had these gaps and it was just a mess. And now it's nice and flush, nice and smooth. I will do a little bit of fine tuning on this. There's specs that BMW lists. I think the rear is supposed to be flush or plus a millimeter. The front is supposed to be flush or lower than the surrounding roof by a millimeter. So I'll need to lower the front just a hair there But the other side looks pretty spot on. So we've got a working cassette and properly functioning glass and all those functions. That's certainly the meat and potatoes of this whole operation. Now it's a matter of just reinstalling all the trims and the visors, the clips, the handles, pillars and lights and everything that we've taken apart. So it's a time-consuming process. I don't think there's any serious tricks with it. I'll record a little bit throughout the process if I come up with anything useful for you, but I think I'm going to go ahead and start with these grab handles, get those going. Quick note on the motor, the new Sunroof Cassette did come with a new gear or pinion that goes into the sunroof itself. I do not see any way to replace the one on the motor. Looks like the earlier sunroof motors, like pre-March 1998, have a circlip that holds that gear on, and you can take the plastic gear out, and it lives behind this black plastic cover, which is just held on with 2 clips. So if you want to pick that down with a little 90-degree pick tool and get a look at your drive gear, you can do that. But on this newer design, I don't see any way that comes apart. So I cleaned up and lubricated the old one, and it seems to be working fine. Also important to note that this motor / gear pinion, all of that can be removed, serviced, and or replaced with the headliner in the car. It's fully accessible through our HomeLink and dome light panel. Headliner does not need to come out to service those parts. With the grab handles back in place, I'm moving on to the upper B pillars. There's only a little bit of a trick here. Remember, they go in from the top, and there's 2 tabs up here that go under that black plastic trim, and it sort of hinges down, and you just press these plastic push pins into the nuts in the chassis. Just a firm push with the thumb worked for me. Then you go around the side and peel out the weather stripping, just like we did to put the headliner in. Now the trick here comes with a seat belt. It actually fits through this black sliding piece on the trim, and you'll just move this piece up and down until it kind of pops into place. In fact, there, now it's right. It wasn't perfect before. It just fits in there one way, so you'll play with that till it snaps in. But if you're wondering why it wasn't held flush against the pillar, that may be why. These C-pillars are tricky to install properly. Anybody can put them in there, but 3 out of 4 of them that we service here are in improperly. So let's discuss the right way to do that. This is a 2000 model year M5, so we've got a few extra attachment points. E39s manufactured before 2000, as I mentioned earlier, only have these 2 plastic clips up here that go in the plastic body nuts in the chassis. For 2002 and later, you've also got a bore here and a bore here for small 8mm screws that look like this. That's because they added the rear head protection airbags, and they didn't want these things blowing into the next zip code should the airbags deploy. Then along the back here, along the rear glass, we have these 3 plastic tabs. This is important. You seat these tabs first, then the plastic ones, and finally put your 8mm screws in. Those 3 tabs on the pillar will go in these 3 tabs as part of the vehicle body. So kind of wedge it in those first, making sure it's flush, pointed out against the chassis of the car. And when you're done, you should be able to see that black dot matrix line in the glass, about 1/8 of an inch all the way down the pillar. So this is what we're talking about right here as it's clipped in all the way. If any of those tabs don't make it, you'll see a big change in that black dot matrix line, or you won't be able to see it at all because the pillar will be too far out. Then you can peek up in there and just see where the tab is going to press into the nut in the chassis. So before you whack that or push it, make sure that that's perfectly lined up, otherwise you will break the plastic. Obviously leave your C-pillar light wiring on the outside, so that's simple. Same thing with the plastic tab here, line it up and just a little push until it clicks in. Now we're ready to put the 8mm screws in. This is the left side C-pillar light. Obviously it will plug in right there, 3-pole connector. And then as you pivot this in, the bottom tabs go in first. These white plastic tabs will sit down low. It's these spring metal tabs up top that you'll push in last, making sure that the light is oriented correctly in the opening for it. If you want to go full German, like from factory, you can tuck the power cable for the light into these little plastic tabs on the back side of the light. It keeps the wiring nice and neat. A few notes for the headliner up here in the front. So the wiring for the mirror has a little grommet. It's a 2-piece grommet. One side goes on the outside of the headliner, the other side goes on the inside. So before you install the visors and the HomeLink panel and the dome light here, make sure that's proper. And for these little clips here, you do not want to go too tight on the Torx 20 screws. Those are 20s. There's a lot of 25s in this job, but these are 20s, as well as the hardware for the visor itself. If you're having trouble pushing the little doors shut and it feels like the plastic is too narrow, loosen this screw up a 1/4 or 1/8 turn, and then you'll be able to get the door to shut. I also reinstalled the little push rivet that was on the driver's side here, as it was before. A reminder that the HomeLink panel goes in first, pushes towards the rear of the car, and pushes up at the plastic clips. The light will go in last. For the A-pillars, we're actually better to install those from outside. Reason being is you'll get a nice view of that tab down here that slots in the dashboard. And you'll get that lined up, push the bottom in first. And then moving along to the top side of it, you'll kind of wrap it around, and the screw bore that sticks out, you'll sandwich that in. If you still have an intact tab, look through the glass from the outside, line that up, give it a nice firm push. And then the last tab is about 2.5 inches down from the headliner interface. And that tab just needs to be pressed against a black plastic thing up here underneath the trim. And that's what holds the A-pillar trim nice and snug against the body. I've done a pretty significant amount of interior cleaning, vacuuming, wiped down the dash, cleaned all of the glass, just the inside. I'll get to the outside before we deliver the car to the customer. But everything's been cleaned inside. I did do the outside of the sunroof glass so I could see fitment a little bit better. You'll pretty much loosen up those 3 T25s on each side until you're happy with the fitment. We're right about flush, a little high in the back, right about flush, a little low in the front, which is within factory spec. Run it back and forth a few more times, and then we're ready to button this thing up. So 54 inch-pounds, not foot-pounds, inch-pounds for the 3 T25s that hold the sunroof in on each side, totaling 6. And then the last thing we do inside here is put the gaiters on. And the gaiters are these black plastic accordion looking things that cover up the screws and make everything look pretty. Your thin side goes at the bottom, the thick side goes at the top in the glass. And you may have noticed that your sunroof slider here, the shade, was going all the way back. It wasn't stopping here like it's supposed to. And that doesn't happen until you put these gaiters on. That's what dictates the stop position of the shade. So what you'll do is take the plastic slides that hold the sunroof shade in place, slide those all the way forwards. You want to put the gaiter in at the front low portion of that black plastic guide first, push it in, sandwich it in all the way to the rear, then kind of stretch it out and orient it right and put the top in, press that all the way in, front to rear. Same deal on the left side. And now you'll notice that when the sunroof opens, the shade here goes just back and hides underneath the headliner. And when it closes, it peeks out to its stop and closes all the way as designed. We can't see it now, but the torque for the sunroof motor to the sunroof cassette, again, those are T25 bolts, is 25 inch-pounds. You'll put just a drop of blue Loctite at the very end of those threads. And that is headliner and sunroof cassette removal / replacement / reinstallation on the BMW E39 5 Series. It is a time-consuming process. You need to be careful, follow order of operations. Don't over-tighten screws. Just be really careful with all the brittle old plastics in these cars these days. But I didn't break one thing. Everything went together beautifully. The sunroof is now quiet and functions as designed once again. As always, thank you so much for watching this E39 Source video. Please don't hesitate to leave any comments and questions down below, and we'll talk in the next one. Take care.